Hello, friends. Today's podcast is about a young Indian developer whose journey from Kolkata to Cupertino is turning heads in the world of technology. 21-year-old Jaagrav Seal has already won the prestigious Apple Swift Student Challenge twice, an extraordinary feat that has turned his coding passion into solutions that make a real difference. So, Jaagrav, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. Yeah, looking forward to this interview.
Okay, so Jagrav, we need to know how did your journey start from a student in Kolkata to a two-time winner of the Swift Student Challenge at such a young age? How did it happen? What inspired you?
It all started with this platform called Solo Learn, right? Now, what Solo
Okay.
Learn is, it is a platform where you can learn how to code directly from their apps. So, I initially started with JavaScript, and I did not want to get into web development. I wanted to get into app development. I never really thought that I would land into web development. So eventually, I started with web development, and as I sort of progressed more and more, I was able to achieve a few. I mean, managed to get a few internships, and thanks to these internships, the stipend that I made from it, I was able to afford a Mac, and that's sort of my entry into learning like Swift UI and iOS app development. So when I got started with Swift UI and iOS app development, that's when I sort of found out about this Swift Student Challenge, right? So I never really thought that I would actually win that hackathon or that contest. But then again, I just participated thinking that this was just a submission for you know just for the sake of participating. But then eventually, when it turned out that the idea did add some value, and it got selected as a winner, I was definitely very excited, and yeah, it was a great thing. So this year again, I thought that I should participate once again, and that's why I participated in Swift Student Challenge 2025, and yeah, I ended up winning it once again.
So, how did the idea for Prescribe It come to you, and how did your father's experience actually help shape the app's creation? How did you land here?
So last year, my father had a heart attack, and he had a surgery, right? So right after his surgery, one of the biggest challenges was that he had around 20 different medicines that he needed to take every single day, right? And during that time, managing medication schedules became a massive challenge for us. So what I personally look for as one of my father's caregivers, was that I tried to look for apps on the App Store or Play Store, which could help me sort of plan out these medication schedules on the basis of the prescription provided by the doctor. But as it so seemed that all these apps had quite redundant processes that you needed to perform in order to like set up medication schedules or reminders, right? And that just became a massive hassle for us, so we ended up not using that app at all. What we ended up doing was we just maintained like a special notebook. But then again, what would happen, right, is that every week this prescription would get updated. So post surgery recovery requires you to visit doctors frequently
Frequently.
in the same month, right? So obviously that's why like these prescriptions used to get updated every single week, and just updating these reminders. I mean, firstly, we couldn't use reminders, and secondly, the notes that we were maintaining, right, updating it every time also became a huge challenge. And also, especially after a surgery, when you have got 20 different medicines to take, each and every medicine is quite critical, right? You need to have those medicines. So that's sort of when I had this idea that when a doctor creates a prescription or writes a prescription, right, at the hospitals, what I have seen is doctors, they use some sort of software on their computers, and in order to write these prescriptions. So obviously it's it's a good feature, it's a good app, but then again, it only creates the prescription, right? It solves only the problem for the doctors. And that's when I thought that we could totally use this data in order to sort of also send it to the user's smartphone or the user's device, where it could then again be sort of then again this prescription data could again be used to sort of create reminders. right? So I sort of followed that idea. That was sort of the inspiration behind building Prescribe It. So um, to summarize, basically what Prescribe It is it's an app for doctors and patients. For doctors, it helps them to create prescriptions and manage them, and also share it with their prescription. I mean, with the patients. Um, while for the patients, the Prescribe It app helps them to sort of set medication reminders and also reach out to their doctors, in the state of emergencies, or if they just want to sort of have a look at the
Mhm.
prescription or maintain a digital format of the prescription. And
Mhm.
every time a doctor updates the prescription on their end, the user's medication schedule also changes. So basically it removes the hassle for the user to sort of set the reminders, and it also solves the problem for doctors where they often face difficulties with creating prescriptions, right? um, and
So,
thanks to the
firstly, when you
yeah,
decided that you would create something like this, um, were you somehow, you were trying to convince yourself that you would be able to do it, or were there some doubts?
definitely there were so many doubts, because one of the biggest constraints of participating in Swift Student Challenge is that your app needs to be completely offline. You cannot have any sort of internet connection, right?
Okay.
So that obviously was a massive challenge, because now I had to find a way by which I could transfer the user's data or the doctor's prescription, the prescription that the doctor creates. I had to send it wirelessly to the user's smartphone, completely offline. So that's where I had to I had to perform a lot of research. Now, I think at this point, like in this day and age of AI, right, it has become very easy to sort of say that you can sort of build anything that you want, right? You just need to have that good idea, right? I wouldn't call Prescribe It as one of the best ideas in the world, but I'm saying that it was definitely a challenge building Prescribe It, but then it wasn't an impossible challenge, right? And that's where sort of my researching skills and development skills also helped me to sort of develop the app. Yeah, now if I had second thoughts on whether or not I should even build Prescribe It for this hackathon or not, definitely I did, because I saw some other people making some other kinds of apps. Like someone made an AR app, someone made some sort of designer app, right? Whereas I was working with this app that was sort of tackling this very critical real world scenario, right? Which, like, my app might not be even the best solution out there, right? We can definitely sort of work on it, polish it as much as possible, and then come up with a
There's
proper
scope of
version of it.
growth and improvement every time at every stage.
Yeah,
But health tech space, do you
yeah,
think it still relies on the outdated technology? Since you shared your experience, I
yeah.
want to know, do you believe young developers can play a major role in bridging the gap? Young people like you,
Absolutely.
because and obsolete technology are we still using in health tech?
We definitely are. So I interviewed a few doctors for like before building Prescribe It. I spoke to a few doctors, like what were the major challenges they faced in their daily lives, right? So you remember when I mentioned that app that doctors use on their desktops for writing prescriptions? Doctors find it very distracting, right? Now you would say that, well, Prescribe It is also quite similar, right? Like, it's still an app that the doctor would need to use on their smartphones, and it would still become kind of distracting when you are conversing with your patient, right? So definitely, like, the technology that is currently being used is not only obsolete, but also it's just not intuitive enough for doctors, right? For doctors, what they are using currently is quite old software. Like, there are multiple companies that are making electronic health record systems, that are just that have a very poor user interface, and also very those softwares are very complex at the same time. So definitely it's a challenge for doctors nowadays to sort of use this software, and it sort of refrains, or sort of adds this friction, for doctors to use technology in their daily lives. If you see, fintech industry, if you see the automotive industry, you will see that these industries are very fast moving. And you'll also see that, of course, the AI industry is also now there. You'll notice that these are very fast pacing industries. And the technology is brilliant, right? um, but at the same time, like if you see health tech, you will notice that hospitals are still relying on Windows 7 computers, or some super old not only operating system, but some super old application in order to manage their hospital beds, um, you know or doctors and OPDs. So obviously it's a massive challenge right now. And what I feel is that where young developers like me can help is sort of come up with startups that can solve these kinds of problems, right? And I don't see a lot of startups doing that. I do see like a few of the startups trying to sort of replace this older technologies. But then again, health tech requires a lot of trust, right? And you can only gain a lot of trust if you have built a very stable product. And building a stable product needs lots and lots of effort and experience and time. And I think it's worth investing the time and effort of the youth, um, you know to build solutions that will help doctors to make their lives easy.
So, what is your another app, Graphic, all about?
GraphIt. So GraphIt is an app that I built completely because out of frustration, right? So
Okay.
the yeah. So
So,
basically,
frustration can give good results as well.
true, true. So what happened was that our college professors and our so the place where I intern at, right? They're also my manager. He used to tell me that every time when I wrote some sort of code, right, he wanted me to explain it using flowcharts, right?
Okay.
So what are flowcharts? Now you might be thinking. So what flowcharts
No,
are? They are like, okay, you know it, right? So they are
I know,
like
I
visual
know.
represent. Of also build the flowchart for it. And
Mhm.
in order to build these flowcharts, we would have to use software like Figma, or there's plenty of other software for building flowcharts, which just became this like I said, it just became a burden. So what I ended up doing was I ended up building an app that would help me to sort of just write code, and that would convert that code and generate like a flowchart out of it. And so that's what the app was about. And yeah, it was completely for like students like me, or employees working at companies that wanted to come up with simple flowcharts for building architectures, or writing code, pretty much it, or writing algorithms. Yeah.
So, Jaagrav, your story is quite inspiring, and I am
Thank you.
sure it must be inspiring the youth watching it. But what advice would you give to other young people who see technology as a big dream, but they are hesitant to take their first step?
I think one of the best things that one of my managers have told me in the past is that don't be afraid of technology. Right now,
Okay.
what that means is what I see often, very often, among my peers as well, or classmates, is that they often don't start with learning programming languages because of the fact that they're afraid of the learning curve. Right? They're not
It
afraid
looks
of the
it,
knowledge. They
it
Yeah.
looks quite it looks quite difficult.
True. It looks like a massive effort, right? And often people would think that, okay, learning something new, learning a new programming language might be very difficult. And, switching these programming languages might also be very difficult. I think, like you can definitely specialize on something, but, for someone who is young, like, us, I think it's very it's completely fine to learn new things and switch as much as possible, because you're basically building the base right now, right? You're building the base on which your future would sort of be built upon. So basically build it in such a way so that it's sturdy enough, so that that in the future you can sort of visualize what kind of path you want to take, right? What I mean by that is that, let's say if you want to get into app development, right, start with learning algorithms, right, and then start with learning programming languages, because these algorithms is what will help you build the base to learn programming languages. And that way, what will happen, right? At one point, you will understand that since you are familiar with writing code and solving a problem very on a very granular level, it would automatically become easy for you to pick up new programming languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of the reason why I was able to pick up on Swift UI quite easily. And Swift UI is not at all a difficult language. You know what the
Mm-hmm.
difficult languages are? They're C++ or Java, right? These are the languages that I wouldn't even call difficult, but it's just syntax heavy. You just need to write too much text to perform the same set of operations that you would need to perform. And if you write the same code in Python, it could happen that you're writing a 100-line code in Java, while you're writing the same code. The equivalent for it is actually just 20 lines of code in Python, right? So if you're afraid of the syntax, then you will never get into that language. and
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's what I was as well.
I think it is more because people are still stuck. Young
Yeah,
guys are still stuck between traditional career path and
true.
they
I
don't
think
want to move away, drift away from what
true,
they
yeah.
have been seeing in the family.
Exactly. I think we think that institutional education will sort of you know build, like, it would act like a shield for us, right? We think that it would act like the degree we are getting, it would act like some sort of shield for us, you know to get jobs. But
Hmm.
as it turns out, it's not such, right? Especially right now, you need to be very skilled, you need to know what you're doing in order to get hired, or in order to be successful, or in order to solve a problem, or build some sort of whatever you want, right? And if you are quite the reason why people are stuck, right, is because they're just not getting the right guidance, right? I was lucky that I the things that I wanted to also develop last year was basically this tiny little device that would be able to record ECG, right, electrocardiogram. And what I wanted to do was, I actually wanted to remotely monitor the ECG of a patient, right? And I did see a few solutions in the market, but they are like super expensive. And also at the same time, these devices require you to be completely at rest in order to use them, right? So that's sort of where the idea was born. I wanted to make this project, which was like a portable ECG device. I ended up calling it a very generic I ended up giving it a very generic name. I called it cardiogram. And so this was just an idea last year. But this year, I participated in a hackathon called TechSprint, which happened at Graphic Era University. And so during that hackathon, we like sort of developed this entire device. We not only just developed the device, but we also developed the app for it. At the same time, me and a few other guys sort of developed this app and the device during our train journey to Dehradun. So it was definitely a quite a great experience. And so we bought a few sensors, and the device, if you see, it's like this small. Yeah, this is basically an ECG device, right? And it's obviously unbelievably small, and it has all the kinds of electronic components right inside of it. Basically, what my job was to sort of choose the right components that would allow me to get the ECG readings. And sort of also at the same time, not only just get the ECG readings, but also send it to a smartphone, where it would sort of again be displayed in a really nice user interface on the app, right? Now that app was also developed by us. It wasn't completely developed by me, it was developed by someone named Arpan Das. And so he's one of my classmates, and he's one of the best iOS developers I know of. So him and I, in fact, he also won Swift Student Challenge, by the way.
That's brilliant. But in the end, I would like to ask from your experience, what's the one trait every aspiring developer should cultivate?
Think persistence is definitely something that's very important. Like persistence and resilience, these two words I would say are very important, in order to sort of be a developer. And I think every developer that is truly passionate for building solutions for problems is sort of both of these two words, is both persistent and resilient when it comes to creating or building stuff, right? What I do think that most developers lack is, you know, like they lack, I don't know how to explain it, but they're not very empathetic towards their users, right? I
Okay.
think they don't think from a very user perspective, and
Real
that's why.
life problems they don't see.
Exactly, they solve it as engineering problems, right? And I think, like, and I I think even I am that to some extent. Like, even I solve problems as as a, for the sake of solving an engineering problem, right? But what happens, right, when you solve just an engineering problem, you end up making a very robotic product that does not work well. That might not be trustworthy enough. That might have, it might not have bugs, but then again, it's just not user friendly enough for anyone to use, right? And I think
Absolutely.
that's very important for developers to also be aware of, which is, to know their users. I understand that, most, like, I'm so sure, like, if any developer watches this interview, they would be like hating me for saying this, I don't know. But I think, it's important for developers to also sort of care, have, some empathy for their users, think it from their perspective while building an app, and build a good relationship with product managers. Like, it's a massive in engineering, it's a massive friction between product managers and engineers, because product managers are sort of the people who are responsible for handling how a end product is made, how an end product looks like, while developers only care about building the solution, right? And I think, if you end up if you as a developer end up sort of having empathy for the user, thinking from a user perspective, it would help you to sort of you know build applications by yourselves that you can sell for yourself, right? You will see a lot of indie developers, right? That's what I think indie developers are really good at. You will see a lot of indie developers developing like some simple apps, right? Like a calendar app or some really ease of life apps. So these apps tend to be super successful because of the fact that they are so user friendly, right? They're so customizable. They are made from a perspective of the users that are using them, right? And I think that's what, if you are able to sort of you know be sort of a developer like that, you would be able to you know build your own startups and build some of the best products that users love, right? It's not just about accuracy, it's not just about solving a problem, it's more about the end product that you ship. Like, this ECG device that I made, right? The same thing that this ECG device does can also be done by an Apple Watch, right?
Okay.
So what's the point of developing this device? See, the reason why Apple Watches are, like, the ECG readings that, the ECG report that this gives, or the Apple Watch gives, right? It's very, it cannot be used in hospitals, right? And because of that reason, like, both of these ECG readings are not that useful that we get from these devices. And however, like, users are still able to use it, and you will see that what the Apple Watch does is it can detect atrial fibrillation, right? So it will warn their users that if they have atrial fibrillation, then it will warn their users that you should you should see the doctor now, right? And so that's the sort of, like, you know where Apple has succeeded as a product developer, where they have made something that is not very useful, something super useful, right? And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think that's where we are trying to get as well. We don't just want to do what Apple Watches do. Of course, this device is going to be much cheaper than an Apple Watch, and at the same time it will have its own app and stuff. But then again, we don't want to stop there, right? We also want to add as much value as possible from this tiny little device, right? And getting medical grade ECGs from a device that problem, specifically, then I think it would not only make these devices more pocket friendly, but also at the same time, it would just become a less of a hassle, right? If we
Mhm.
can, like, instead of 15 days, if we make it like at least a year, right? You must have
Mhm.
used those you must have seen those glucose monitoring strips, right? So they
Mhm.
are so easy to use, right? They're, because of the fact that they are reusable, it just makes the entire user experience so much better. So that's sort of a challenge that I'm currently focusing on. There's one more thing which is like a ring. There's like multiple challenges that me and a couple of my friends have picked up, and we are still like choosing like which idea to sort of work on.
Mhm.
And that's sort of the reason why we got the 3D printer, so that we could sort of prototype, build prototypes for the products that we have in mind. And
Mhm.
for building these prototypes, we needed to learn a lot of new things. Like we learned, I'm currently learning this software called Fusion 360,
Okay.
which is like a, yeah, which is sort of used for developing products or
So you
industrial
need to
design.
continuously upgrade yourself.
Correct, correct. I think that's also somewhere that I'm starting to find a special interest in, which is industrial design. Like software engineering is quite fun, but
Mhm.
software engineering sort of, like, I've done it for like 4 or 5 years now, and it's starting to sort of get a bit boring for me, right? So I'm starting
Mhm.
to sort of also look towards the hardware direction as well. And and
Mhm.
like there's so many things that you can learn from the internet, and there's so many things that you can buy yourself and build by yourself.
Mhm.
It might be for building a startup, it might be for just a hobby, but if
Mhm.
it keeps your brain going, it's I think it's a very good thing.
Thank you so much, Jaagrav. Thank you.
Thank you, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.